Hello, I'm Matt.
I'm Sonja.
And welcome to another episode of Our Life in Podcast, the autobiographical podcast where me and my wife talk to you about our life's experiences. Hope that you can find something you can relate to, something you can laugh about, or feel sorry for us. I don't care, whatever.
What?
I would like to, again, thank the listeners that have been returning for listening to us for the last month or so and putting up with all our audio issues. It would seem to me that we found probably a really good solution with a better microphone this time.
It's pretty.
I think it has omnidirectional recording, which helps tremendously.
Well, it's a big old ball.
But, so again, thanks for the patience. Thanks for our returning listeners. For everybody else, please, do the like, comment, subscribe crap that YouTube likes you to do. And if you haven't already, please share the video / podcast around. Let it be known that me and my wife are making this goofy-ass podcast, and give us some love. Today, we are switching gears a little bit. We were going to talk about 2020 a bit, but the recording wasn't what I would have liked personally, so now we are going to switch up a little bit. Something that 2020 did affect for a lot of people also is the workplace, jobs, and things like that. And on a few previous podcasts, me and Sonja have talked vaguely about some of our experiences working in retail and whatnot. So I think we're just going to tell a couple stories from our experience in the workplace.
You probably have better ones than me, but I have some.
Well, I am going to start with working at a fast food restaurant in Louisiana that I feel... I was probably 15, 16 when I started working at this place. And I do feel it's worth mentioning. It does have a couple stories involved. The first of which is that it felt kind of like I was the odd man out. I don't know if there was a clique or a clique.
A clique?
Yeah, what an old-fashioned...
Blues or Reds?
West Side or East Side. But there was I think there was a group of people at this fast food establishment that were basically all buddy-buddy. And everybody that wasn't in that circle were kind of shit on.
That's literally every job I've had.
This was a little extreme to me because one of the things was I noticed during the course of working there, one of the rules, as it was stated out, is that we are allowed a meal and, 15-minute break or whatever. And I would see people take their meal and they wouldn't pay for it. And the rules were never clearly stated that I had to pay for the meals. I assumed you did, but I kept seeing people not pay for it. So I made myself a nice hamburger, some fries and whatever. I had myself a meal on one of my breaks after working there maybe 2 weeks. I come back from break, and the manager on duty, which is part of this group of friends, starts bitching at me about stealing from the company and writing me up, and you need to pay for their food. If you don't pay right now, then, we'll fire you. I had the money, but I was still pissed about that incident.
Did you tell them about the other people you've seen?
I've mentioned it before. I mentioned it to them, and they said, well, they all paid for their meals, and I'm thinking to myself, when? I worked with these people for 6 hours. They were right here at the fryer with me, and just up and left their food. I never once saw them go up to the register. I even saw you talk to the people as they fucking left their food. Whatever.
Favoritism. Favorite part of the job.
It wasn't the best job, and in Louisiana they also paid really poorly. And I would work maybe 20 to 25 hours a week, whatever,
Part-time.
It's part-time, but whatever a 16-year-old is allowed to work down there. And I'd probably only have $50 to $60 to show for it on my check.
Jesus Christ, you can make that an hour.
Well, the pay was at that time, maybe $4 or $5 an hour for minimum wage. It was really low. They were always at, and I think they still are, at federal minimum wage. In some places, including somewhere else that I worked, which I'll get to in a minute, did pay just minimum wage, and you would never get a raise for the entirety of the time you were there. No matter how long someone was there, 2-3 years, they'd never get a raise unless federal went up.
Yeah, I don't have that. The jobs I've had, you got a raise. Except for one.
So, that was my experience, part of my experience in my first job. I eventually got to probably not the most professional way. I didn't get fired from that place. I just up and left.
I would too.
I don't know if I left after a shift, before a shift. I know I didn't even fucking tell them though. I just left. I was done. I was done with the treatment from certain people. The one thing though that stuck out to me because it was kind of dumb was how one guy that worked there told me the best way to pass the time was to pretend I was SpongeBob working at the Krusty Krab. And this guy was like 18, older than me, and I'm like...
This is what this guy's advice was?
I was like, that's the best advice, your sage wisdom from an older person? Pretend I'm SpongeBob? But yeah, that was my first real job. I delivered newspapers in New York also, which sort of a story, but not as much.
Weren't you like 8?
I'll just go... No, I was like 10, 11. Oh. I'll just go over that real quick. It sucked. Half the time, people wouldn't even fucking pay their bill. And then we'd get in trouble for it. We'd be lucky to come home with like $10 a week for doing the work. And at that time, you're delivering papers for 2-3 hours a day.
That sounds like 1950s. Like, here's a quota, young chap.
It was. And like I said, most of the times you'd collect weekly, people wouldn't pay. And what the fuck's a 10-year-old supposed to do? Are they supposed to strong-arm an adult? Like, hey, fucking pay up or else.
Yes.
And I say we because the only real story I have from delivering newspapers was that I used to do it with one of my friends. And we actually had a little bit of a falling out over this because I guess we couldn't correlate on who would do what. And there was one week that this person didn't show up. And I refused to share my split of the money with them.
Me neither.
But it put a strain on that particular friendship, but I'd say everything's kind of probably good now. But that's pretty much...
You didn't pay me when we were 7.
That's pretty much the only story from that one.
Well, since you just mentioned 2 jobs, I never really had a job until I was, like, a lot older, when we were together. But... when I was a teenager from maybe 13 to 14 onward, I was a babysitter. Like, I'd babysit my nieces and nephews. My first real, like, big babysitting job was my cousin's kid. I did that for, like, 2 years. And when I first started watching him, he was 2 months. So 2 months to, like, 2 years. I was like, holy crap. My first real job after we moved out and was becoming the big adults was at a retail shop. Grocery store, and my god, that was the worst freaking emotional roller coaster. Some of the things that come to mind is this old man was buying beer, and I had no manager with me because it was at night. They left at like 9:30 because it was 24 hours grocery store. I know it's weird, but this guy, it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and my manager was already gone for the night, and I can never get a hold of the stocking guys. Even with a walkie-talkie or a phone, they would never come up. So it was like, he was buying beer, and New York state law is you have to show your ID. It doesn't matter what age you are, they always have to check you. Well, this guy's like, why do you need to see my ID? Go get a manager. And I was like, well, my manager just left, so I need to see your ID. I saw his wallet and his ID was right there, but he refused to give it to me. He's like, oh, I'm 65 years old and this is my birthday. I'm like, I know, sir, but I have to see it. It's New York state law and store policy. And he's like, are you in school? I'm like, no. He's like, well, it's a learning situation for you. I don't know if this guy was already drunk and he was just buying more beer. He was with 2 other people. But all I could think is, like, you're trying to make a scene right now when you couldn't take 2 seconds to show me your freaking license.
To kind of add to your story here, too, with that, because I will get more into the convenience store area that I worked, tobacco shop, whatever you want to call it. But we had that problem so much during that time. I mean, I think anywhere you work, people just seem like assholes when you ask for their ID, especially if they're regulars.
Yeah, but we see so many people, it's like, we don't care how fucking old you are, just show me your damn ID. It's the goddamn law. If you don't like it, move.
Well, I've had people that would I've asked for their ID. Oh, I'm 50-something years old. Don't I look my age? Like, kind of like what you had. And then I had others that would be like, oh, well, fuck you, fat ass. You're just carding me because you're racist or something. I have had people call me racist when I have carded them.
Oh, I have a story for that one, but that's my second job.
So, I don't know why it's so hard for people to understand that is your job. And I think in a lot of cases, it's people that are twacked out of their mind or already drunk, and they just don't want to fucking put up with it.
Or just plain old-ass assholes.
And I know for a fact I've had to turn people away that were drunk, and they got mad at me like it was my fault, because you can't legally sell them alcohol if you know they're drunk, because then it becomes a liability. But they would verbally berate me or whatever. I fucking hated that shit.
Well, back to this story, like, I can't... That was basically the gist of it. He might have said more, but that's all I remember. Like, this is a learning experience. I'm like, what the hell am I learning? That you're a jackass? But...
I mean, that's what I got out of it.
The other thing that pissed me off at this job, and it emotionally broke me, was, while I was at this job, like, a couple months in, my father died. And, like, I took off maybe like a week off, and they're like, take as much time as you want, it's fine, blah, blah, blah. My cousin also worked there, and they were treating her better than me. He was my own father, and she was nothing. She was just a niece that would come by sometime. But I was so pissed, because I'm like, it's my dad. It's just an uncle to her that she hasn't even hung out with in like a long time. But, like, I come to work, I smiled at the customers, did my job, all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, I was out. I was just broke. Well, another thing, too, is like, oh, you need to smile more. Customers, like, yeah, smile and do this and that. And I was like, if I smiled anymore, my cheeks would break. Yes, I was having some trouble and stuff. Like, come on, my dad just died. I was grieving. But, like, I was professional. And I'm like, my dad, he would want me to continue with my life, all that good stuff. And that's what I did. Like, every time I had a customer, I'd smile, be friendly, like, joke about something, all that good stuff. But they never saw that. They only saw the bad things, or they just chose to see the bad things. But a year later, fast forward, my aunt died. And that took me, bad. It was just, like, kind of sudden and everything like that. And I was supposed to work that night of her... It was during the winter. They weren't having the burial, but it was her wake. And I couldn't... I was going to try to go to work, but I was like, I can't stop crying. It's bad. I was supposed to work, like, the night shift and stuff. So I called in, and I was like, look, I just saw my aunt. I can't work. And she goes, what was your schedule tonight? And it was, like, a 7 to 11 or something like that. And I told her, she's like, oh, okay. And it was no, sorry for your loss, take your time, nothing. Just, oh, goodbye. I'm like, are you fucking serious? So, about that time, I was like, yeah, I guess I'm gonna look for another job. I can't do this anymore. And the next month in March, I got hired to another place. But
before you get to that place also...
Well, I'm not done with this place right now. Those are the two big problems I had at that job.
Well, I was going to intercept here because when your father died, I actually had trouble at my job at that time.
Yeah.
I worked at a pizza place, and they were short-staffed one of the nights, and they wanted me to stay a little later to help out. And I said I would stay for a little bit, maybe an extra 20 minutes or whatever. It ended up turning into almost an hour.
It was more than that, sir. Oh. You were supposed to get done at 9. Here it was midnight, and you still weren't home.
Well, Sonja had shown up at my job because she was feeling down, and obviously she was having some trouble. Her father had died not that long before that. And I went, and I had already worked here like 3 hours, so I told someone there that I'm leaving. And the next day, I come in, and they basically, I guess, fired me for leaving without telling anybody, or at least telling the manager directly, because, heaven forbid, and they kept making a big deal out of, well, you said you'd stay and help, and all sorts of stuff, and I'm like, my wife is having some emotional distress right now. She's going through some hardships. Fuck you guys. I don't give two shits about your stupid pizza, and I'm out.
Yeah, but the thing is, I thought someone said, it's like, oh, we got this, go ahead and leave. Was it like an assistant manager or something?
It was a supervisor, not quite assistant manager sort of thing. Regardless, the point was I didn't tell the lead manager I was leaving, and I left them high and dry. Then, yeah, go fuck yourself.
Yeah, but all you guys were doing were dishes, and you had like 6 people on.
And if we didn't have that fucking goddamn sports team that day, it wouldn't have been as bad, but...
Well, the thing it's a broken law, because legally, they can't keep you. Maybe there's like some loophole or gray area where they can't keep you more than an hour later, but if you chose not to stay, like if you are on your scheduled work thing, they can't keep you over legally here. So, law broken.
Well, I got that place in trouble for certain things. I'm gonna oust myself as a whistleblower, but we'll get to that when it's time for me to get to it. Go ahead and do your next one.
Well, I'm still at the same job here because there's other things. The manager treated me like a child. This was their line. Oh, it seems like you don't want to be here. You always look grumpy and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm dealing with my father's death. I'm sorry I'm not smiling 24/7. But like I said, every time I had a customer, I was like, oh yeah, let's do this, cheery, and like, hello, how are you? But apparently that wasn't good enough. So I was like, I don't know what more I can do. But I don't know. I felt it was like high school. So my manager always treated me like a child. And I don't think she was assistant manager, but she was like a head supervisor. Was only like a year or two older than me and treated me like shit all the time. I had this one customer, she was asking for this laundry detergent that was HE. At the time, I didn't even know what the hell that means. It means high efficiency for like front loaders or whatever. And I was like, oh, let me get someone. I was like, I'm not sure what you mean. I'm like, oh, I'll get you a manager. And she's like, oh, no, it's fine. Well, apparently it was not fine because she went and got a manager and said, well, she wasn't much help or something like that. But I was like, how was I not help? I literally was going to get somebody for you and you said, never mind. But after that fiasco, they called me into the office and said, well, if someone needs help, get somebody. And I'm like, I did. And they're like, there was like this button that was near the checkout that you hit and someone would come because they would have like a beeper in the office that goes beep, beep, beep. Well, every time I hit that button, nobody came. Literally nobody came. So they took me in the office and they were saying like, well, we noticed you don't really hit the button and this and that. And I was like, well, every time I hit the button, nobody comes. And like, I tried to help this customer, but you can't help everybody. If they don't want the help, they don't want to. That's what I remember saying. But all they were like, oh, that sounds like fighting words. That sounds like fighting words. I was like, well, you're literally coming at me, like attacking me. So of course I'm going to defend myself. Like I don't know. The job was just freaking crazy. And I remember there was people that started under me that were younger than me, but they were in, like Matt said earlier, the clique. And they got to be in a higher position, which was like help desk behind where they got cigarettes and stuff like that. And I was like, I've been here longer than she has, and I've like proven myself, but the only reason I won't get through there is because I'm not in your little clique. It was like high school, that job, and I only was there for a year, and that was a year too long because, like I said, it was emotional distress, and the second one was even worse.
Well, do you want to go on to the second one?
Sure. The second one I had was at a drugstore, and the first year was great. Well, when I first started, I was like, oh my god, the people here are really nice. Like, I'm getting used to it. And I was like, I felt appreciated. It was like night and day from the first job to this job. And I was like, holy crap. I mean, looking at it now, it was probably just because beginner employment or whatever, like jitters. I don't know what you'd call it. But I actually look forward to going to work. I had like a really good friend there that I called my work mom. And it was, like, weird because I think, in a way, she helped me with, like, the grieving with my dad and stuff. Because, like, we would talk a lot about our past. Like, she had her dad dying and, like, it was, like, meant a lot to her and stuff like that. And she would tell me stories about him and I would tell her stories about my dad. But I think it was some of her mannerisms reminded me of him. So, yeah. But that job didn't really get shitty until I became a supervisor. Not a full-time, but a part-time. They told me that I would be full-time even before I became a supervisor. Like, oh, you'll work up to full-time and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that never came. When I became a supervisor, they rushed me because, like I said, my work mom was diagnosed with cervical cancer, which absolutely broke me. And she had to be off to have surgery and all that good stuff and chemo. So they basically rushed me because the girl that was going to be a supervisor was also leaving. So I was basically rushed into it because I already knew like half of the things and I was already like kind of training for it, but they rushed that training and they didn't even train me in some things. They're like, oh, didn't no one teach you this? No one teach you this? I'm like, no, you were the one that taught me. And you're like, oh, we'll do this at a later date. We'll do this later. It's not a big deal. Well, later came and I never got trained for that stuff. So that was a freaking disaster. And I worked there for almost 3 years. I quit right before my 3 years. But out of that 3 years, I called in twice. You hear that? Twice. And they did this guilt trip. One time, like, I was just really exhausted, tired, and I was like, I need a break. Because I would work like 5-hour shifts, 8-hour shifts, but it'd be an 8-day stretch. I'd get like a day off and then work a 12-day stretch. And it's like, Jesus Christ, I don't even get days off. So I called in once. The other time I called in, I had no voice. I don't know if I was just having like hay fever, allergies, what was going on. But I literally had no voice. I called in, I was like, well, I'm going to see the doctor today. And he's like, well, you're really letting the team down, not coming in. And he's like, are you seeing the doctor? I'm like, yes. But I was like, I literally have no voice. How am I supposed to work with no voice at a job that you need your voice?
Signs. Similar to, like, Wile E. Coyote, you just hold them up on the, like, billboards.
The white picket signs. But I just couldn't believe it. Like, I literally had no voice, and he had the nerve to say something like this. When I called in the first time, a girl supervisor answered. She's like, well, that's bullcrap. Click. I'm like, are you serious? It's bullcrap because I got sick? Like, I literally called in twice the 3 years I worked there, but they made sure to make you feel guilty. And I'm like, I don't really feel guilty. Fuck you. I don't have a voice. I'm going to go see the doctor. So I thought I was getting bronchitis, but I wasn't. But the thing is, the time I called in that I had no voice, I felt sick the day before, and I left a note saying, like, I probably won't be in tomorrow because I feel like utter crap. Because the day before, I went home early, but they had no one to fill in the night shift, so I basically went home for an hour or two, took a nap, and had to go right back in to work because it wasn't that far from me. And I literally did what I was supposed to, and I, like, sat in the office for a lot because I was like, oh my god, I felt bad, and people are like, you look like crap. I'm like, I know, and they made me come back in. But this job was really, really toxic. Like, the customers were awesome, and, like, made me feel good about myself, or I don't know. Like, you know what I mean. But the freaking people you worked with, oh my god. Supervisors, they would get 1 weekend off a month, and they told me, because they hired another supervisor after me, who, again, started after me and was younger than me, but she got the full-time position because apparently I wasn't a brown noser enough. That's why she got it. I was freaking pissed. But they told me, since she was there, that we would alternate weekends so I wouldn't have to work every single weekend. But guess what didn't happen? I still worked every weekend. I had like 1 day off after they hired her, and that was it. So I worked every holiday, and I worked every weekend, even though I was like one of the only people that had a family. I was fucking pissed. Like, I lived with Matt over here in an apartment, and I never got to see him. We lived together, and I saw him for an hour a day. My family, forget it. Friends, forget it. But it was getting to me. Like, I had no life. I woke up, went to work, came home, went to bed. That was my life for like a year, and I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Unfortunately, I believe that the thought is that that's how how life should be, is work. I'm not saying that's the way for everybody, but I think that the general consensus of how a life should be is that you work hard until you retire and can't enjoy your life anymore, and then, you just whittle away.
Well, that'd be fine if it was a 9 to 5, it had weekends off. That wasn't me. I was working, like I said, 8 to 12 day stretches, have 1 day off, and go back to an 8-day stretch again. Like, I just had, like, no life. I had no time for myself. Like, that one day, I would catch up on my chores, or, like laundry and dishes or something like that. But you did dishes a lot, because I was always working.
Like you cared.
No, but I did appreciate it. And cooking, because I didn't get home till 6. But I remember on Sundays, I would be the opener and closer, which was like 10 hours. 10 hours? I'm not a fucking nurse. I'm a goddamn supervisor at a drugstore. But it was not good. I went to a dark spot, depression. As you can probably tell, I'm getting a little emotional, but it was a dark time.
Well, seeing that Sonja has to settle herself over there, I guess I'll pick up the thread here.
Well, I just mentioned, too, I was like 24 to 25. That's pretty young to have that feeling, anyway.
So, my next job that's even worth talking about, I unfortunately have had many jobs, and I don't know if that's reflects poorly on me or not. I have a way of viewing the world and how things are done, so maybe that's conflicted a bit sometimes. But my next job was at a tobacco and convenience store, sold gas, and a couple other odds and ends. And there's so many stories from the brief period of time I was there. I was there for 2 or 3 years, something like that. And during that time frame, we had robberies, we had fights, we had clowns, we had my sister show up.
Is she a clown too?
She wasn't a clown then.
Well, that's like, you said clown, and then you're like, my sister. That's worse than a clown?
So, to start, I guess I'll get the easier one out of the way. The clown is the easiest one, because of literally what it was just this guy who came in fully dressed as a clown, didn't say anything, and, came in, bought a big, like, 20 or 30 rack of beer, pointed to a pack of cigarettes. Again, he didn't say anything.
I have one question. Was it near Halloween?
No.
He must have been hired.
It was the middle of the summer.
He must have been hired for a birthday party, and he had it. He's like, I need beer now.
He did. It was creepy and funny at the same time. I didn't know what to say. Again, I think it might have been a little deliberate, because the guy was silent the whole time. He could have easily had said something. Instead, he just pointed to everything he wanted. And I'm like, this guy's either going to rob me, or this is like a bit. Like, he's purposely doing this.
That probably would have made my night, and be like, you know what? Nothing could be crazier than that. I'm ready for this night.
But yeah, so he picked up his 30 rack of cigarettes and he was on his way, and I just turned to the manager after. I'm like, what the fuck just happened in here? So the reason I even brought up my sister, though, was maybe the same week, maybe even the next day. My sister, who lives in New York, she just randomly showed up at my job, and she didn't tell anybody she was coming down to Louisiana or anything. I wasn't expecting her, and I just see her come through the door, and I had to, like, do a double take. I'm like, I have seen literally everything come through this door, and you're the last person I expected to see.
Wait, was it the same day as the clown?
It was like the next day.
Oh, nice.
That's what I said. I've seen literally everything, and my sister was the last thing I expected to see come in here.
Oh my god, you're a little too normal.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it was kind of a surprise visit, but... So the next thing I'm going to bring up was the robberies, because we had people shoplifted all the time. I'm calling them robberies in that sense, but there are other stores that I've helped out in, and while I wasn't there at the time it happened, they were held up at like a gunpoint, stuff of that nature. But one in particular that stuck out to me, because like I've said, people shoplifted all the time, but there's one guy that I very clearly caught trying to shove a huge bottle of Crown Royal down his pants, like a giant glass bottle, because we did have stuff behind the counter, but we also had the bigger bottles out on the shelves down there at in the store. So the guy tried to, not even really trying to hide it, but he had these big baggy pants, just tried to shove a giant bottle down there. And I told the manager that guy is clearly shoplifting, and we need to call him out on it. So the manager had me go to the door to stop the guy from leaving. He called the cops, and the cops usually, they were right down the street, so they'd be there in like 3 to 5 minutes usually. And that guy came up shortly before the cops got there. My manager was like, "Are you going to pay for what's in your pants?" And the guy tried to run out the door, which I was in front of. As he tried to run out the door, I instinctively grabbed like his coat or something. I didn't really, I shouldn't have tried to do anything. That's usually the rule with that. Yeah. Don't try to be a hero or whatever. But I just instinctively grabbed his coat to try to keep him in the store. And when I did, he fell, and that glass bottle shattered inside his pants. And the cops came like right after that happened. I didn't get in trouble, luckily. Very luckily, because that probably could have ended up bad for me. I'm sure that guy had cuts all the fuck up his leg, but...
Oh, that'll teach him.
And, like I said, that's not even, I guess, the worst incident that happened, because it didn't involve me, but it was another coworker and another person trying to steal something, but she was out in the parking lot, and she was trying to get her to come back in the store, like, "Oh, can you come back in the store for a minute?" And the girl got violent, and she started throwing punches. Well, my coworker apparently does not respond well to that, and she started throwing punches, and they started trying to rip each other's clothes off, and everything else in the parking lot. Trust me, it was nothing I wanted to see. But... So yeah, that place had a lot of crazy stories, and I didn't even touch on the fact that during Hurricane Gustav, one of the hurricanes that went through, we had knocked out the power in the store, and we had to basically ring everybody up with pen and paper that whole day, because despite the fact that a hurricane destroyed the place, we were still open. But
that would suck.
It wasn't fun.
Well, like, we lost power at the job I had that I just mentioned, and I think if it came to that, they would have to do pen and paper, but I think they would just close and get everybody out. But I remember there was a Christmas Eve. It was unseasonably warm that Christmas Eve, but we lost power. And we're like, oh, Jesus. And so we had to get what our manual said basically was we had to get everybody to the front of the store and basically wait until it came back on or just escort them out. And some people waited. Some people were like, "Oh, can I leave my cart here and I'll be back?" And we're like, "Okay, yeah, that's fine." It was only off for maybe 10, 20 minutes tops. And some people were like, "Oh, look at that." But the thing was, at the time, we had really old registers. So we had to wait until they boot up. They were IBM brand. Like, yeah, this power's back on, but we need 5 more minutes for this to boot up.
So, yeah, it wasn't a fun situation. And I have actually, so I think I should obviously talk about how this particular job ended. And how this job ended was, one day we had like the shopping cart that we used in the store to bring out our garbage and stuff from the store, like all our garbage bags, and then we carted it out to the back and what have you. And I pushed this cart against the front door. Hold on 1 second.
Gross.
I'll maybe keep that in. Anyway. So I pushed this cart against the front door to push it open, and the glass on the front door, because you know how those convenience store doors look, how gas station doors look, they're same thing, basically mostly glass. But the glass, just from the slightest touch, completely shattered. And it was obviously my fault, and kind of my fault. I was the guy that pushed the cart into it.
That's like a Looney Tunes moment.
So, the glass shattered. So, there's a Looney Tunes moment, as it is, which I'll talk about real quick after. But I brought the cart back in. Everything was fine for the night. We cleaned up the glass. We put plank over it. Plank.
You mean plywood?
No, I fucking mean plank.
Alright.
But we put plank over it. And, anyway, the next day...
Wow.
The next day, I come back into work, and the owner of the store is there, and he's pissed. And they basically gave me an ultimatum that I pay like $500 for their front door, or I lose my job. And I was like, it's a fucking accident that could have happened to anybody. It could have happened to a customer. That glass literally just had to be hit in the right spot and it would have imploded. Yeah, would he have chased the fucking customer down in the parking lot saying, hey, $500 now?
He probably would have. But carts have those rubber thingies on it too, so that glass was pretty flimsy.
So, I obviously took the ultimatum, told him to go shove it up his ass, and I left. So I basically got fired from that job for breaking a window accidentally.
Yeah,
that's literally an incident that could have happened to anybody. This guy was a jerk. This was, like I had mentioned earlier, this was the job where you could be there for several years and not get a raise unless minimum wage went up.
Funny thing was, too, when we went down years later, some of the people you worked with are still there.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if it's just job security or what, but yeah, some of the people that worked there when I was there still are there.
Well, most of them were like middle-aged to like 50, pushing 50 or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like, why they're just waiting for retirement.
There is so many more job-related stories I have to tell, but this podcast is already running kind of long. So maybe we'll split this up into a part 2. Oh, shit, real quick, though, that story, the Looney Tunes story that I said I was going to say, it's nothing big, but a window wasn't the only thing I broke at this store. So, I was mopping the floor one time, and as I was mopping the floor, the mop breaks in half, clean in the middle. I don't think I did anything, put any extra force or anything to it. I could be wrong. Regardless, it broke. And as it broke, I go down. And as I go down, the mop bucket goes down. So I just completely... I destroyed the mop, spilled water everywhere. So...
How do you break a... Was it wooden?
Yes, it was a wooden mop. The handle was wooden. Anyway, so I finished mopping. I obviously cleaned up my mess. And my manager goes to me, he's like, hey, come here. And he goes and he shows me the security video of me destroying the place. And he watched it on loop and laughed his ass off every time. He's like, look at this. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah, but the thing is, he probably was watching it as it was happening, and he's like, oh shit, I gotta rewind this.
He probably saved a copy of that for himself, honestly. But
the only one thing I'm going to add, because it's not that long, my old manager did not fire people. There was this one woman that treated customers like crap. It took corporate to come in and say, you need to fire her today or we will. And he finally fired her. This other girl who would, let's just say, snort some pills in the ladies' bathroom, because there was powder everywhere and a straw. She would steal from the safe. She would steal items and mark them as store credit. Yeah, she didn't get fired until a year after I quit. And she was doing it the entire time. She worked there, I think, about 4 or 5 years. So yeah, great job. Don't work there.
So, my final thoughts on this. Obviously, people need to work for a living. people need to start somewhere. But if you can't tell from our stories...
You have even more stories. I have a couple.
Yeah, I have even more stories. If you can't tell
Maybe we'll do a part 2.
If you can't tell from the stories that we had told, your mental health is not worth any job or any amount of money. Yes, you need to make ends meet. And that is something that has to be done regardless. And like I said, you have to start somewhere. But take care of yourself regardless. And don't fucking listen to the assholes that you work for that bitch and complain whenever you have to take a day off for yourself to recharge. Or even if you're sick. They're not worth it, so fuck them.
Yeah, but at the end of the day is you're going to have money, but then you're going to be dying at, like, let's say age 50. But you have no life experience. But if you have a job that's more lenient, you have more life experience and a life to remember.
If at all possible, I can't say too much for myself job-wise, but I know how I've done basically everything, every major thing I've ever wanted to do in my life, I have done. And it's because I put in that time and energy into it. I put that time and energy into basically myself. So, do that. It'll be hard, maybe, depending on who you are, your lifestyle, but it'll be worth it in the long run. Put the time into yourself that you put in for others at these bullshit jobs. Anyway, there's my cheesy moment. So, to end our podcast, we have the questions and answer thing. First thing I do want to address, someone mentioned on one of the comments on our video, the fact that we took a trip to Japan. I'm just going to let you know, to that person and all the other listeners, our vacations, including the Japanese one, is something we are going to get to at some point. So stay tuned. We'll eventually cover that as well.
Well, spoiler, before we even started this podcast, as like a test run for me and you and see how things were going, Japan was the one that we tested, but we didn't think it was good enough until,
But anyway, I got my random question of the week pulled up here for us.
Oh, good God.
So the question this week is, would you rather look like a potato or feel like a potato?
I already do.
For which answer?
Both.
Sonja, you're gorgeous.
Stop it. I am not.
Yes, you are. But answer the question regardless. Would you rather look or feel like a potato?
Feel, I guess.
What does it mean by feel like a potato? Does that mean that
you have rough skin and you feel...
That's what I mean. Do you feel like just fat, bloated all the time? Like, eating a potato probably make you feel? Or do you have like weird spuds growing off you and shit like that?
Ew.
But then again, that'd fall into looking like potato, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so it's probably like both ways.
This question sucks.
Yeah, answer another one.
Hold on, let me find another one.
Well, my thing is, if you have any questions about this podcast, questions in general, or leave a comment describing a horror from your job, go for it.
If you could change your name right now, what would you change your name to? First and last name.
Narine... I can't think of the last name.
I think I'd go with Spanky Bald Dick.
Why?
I don't know, it was just the first name I thought of.
I can't think of the last name, just Narine, which is Japanese.
This fucking ending sucks. These questions suck. Whatever. Anyway, like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the podcast this week, and have a great day.
Bye. See you next time.
No. Shit.